Hey everyone, and welcome back. Elective egg freezing, it's everywhere these days, especially here in Singapore.
It's true.
So fascinating, right? And you found us this journal article from Human Fertility that I thought was really interesting because it's not just about the science,
Yeah.
It's about how do we actually talk about this? How do we counsel women, especially with it being so new here?
Yeah. I think that's something that often gets missed, right?
Totally.
Like all the excitement of a new procedure.
It's like, ooh, shiny new thing.
Right. But how do we actually counsel people? How do we have good conversations about it?
Exactly. And this article, they actually use flowcharts, which I kind of love because it's visual
That's cool.
to help guide that conversation. So it's kind of like what we're doing right now in a way.
Yeah. I mean, it's important because there's so much information out there.
Oh, I know.
And misinformation.
Especially online.
Right. Especially online. When you've got, all these egg freezing startups and they're like, come freeze your eggs. It'll be great.
It's like that freeze time button.
Right. Exactly.
It's like no downsides. Everything's perfect.
And it's so much more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think this idea of having this structured counseling is so important.
Yeah, and also remembering this procedure is time sensitive. I mean, in Singapore, we've got that age limit, right? 21 to 37.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't want it to be this totally rushed decision either.
Right. Exactly.
So let's unpack that a bit. Why are women thinking about this in the first place? What are some of the big motivators?
It's interesting, right? Because it really runs the gamut. And I think that's kind of the point of why you need structured counseling, because everyone's coming at it from a different point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Some women, career is a big one.
Huge. Yeah.
They're really focused on their careers right now. Maybe they're not even thinking about kids for another 5-10 years, but they want to have that option open.
Makes sense.
Right. And then there's others, they're like, well, I want to be financially stable.
Yeah.
And then I'll feel more comfortable starting a family.
Yeah. Which, let's be real, that's a huge factor these days.
Huge factor.
Especially in a place like Singapore.
Especially in a place like Singapore.
Right.
And then, of course, there's those who are like, well, I haven't found the right partner yet.
Yes.
And I don't want to feel pressured.
Right. And that's something this article really highlighted, right, is how much that plays into the Singapore context. Because there is that societal pressure, maybe even more so than in other places.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's definitely a timeline that I think a lot of people feel, just pressure from society. And there's also this stigma. The article talks about the stigma around single motherhood.
Right. Which is still unfortunately a thing.
Which is still unfortunately very real.
Yeah. So we've got these external pressures, but then there's also that kind of internal what if, right? Like, what if I freeze my eggs and then I change my mind and I don't even want kids? I mean, that's got to be going through some women's minds too.
Right. And the article actually addresses that, if you find yourself in that position, you do have options. You can dispose of them. You could donate them to research.
Okay.
You could donate them to another person who's hoping to conceive.
It's interesting.
So you're not stuck. There is that flexibility.
Right, which I imagine is reassuring. But I'm guessing if you decide later on, okay, now's the time I want to use those frozen eggs for IVF, I'm guessing it gets a little more complicated, especially here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, right now in Singapore, you have to be married to use your frozen eggs for IVF.
Right, so it goes back to that whole societal, legal thing of being married. But what if you say, okay, forget that, I'm going elsewhere, I'm going to a country where it's different? Is that even possible?
That's a really interesting question, and one that I think a lot of people are, kind of grappling with right now and figuring out. And legally, nothing's preventing you from taking your eggs to another country. However,
there's a however coming.
There are some challenges, let's say that.
Okay.
Right, so transporting frozen eggs, that's not simple.
Yeah, I imagine. It's not like you just
you expect to carry on.
Right, exactly.
Oh, okay.
So there's that, and then, finding a clinic in another country that you trust.
Yeah.
And that you feel comfortable with.
Right. All the logistics.
Right. All the logistics.
Wow.
Yeah, it gets complicated really fast.
But I guess even knowing that's an option is empowering for some women.
Right.
Right.
It introduces that autonomy.
Yeah.
And it just shows you how much this whole field is changing.
Oh, it's still.
And how women are kind of,
taking the reins, yeah.
Taking the reins, exactly. It's like this whole other world of options is opening up, which I guess is exciting.
Yeah,
But also can be overwhelming
totally.
because it's easy to get caught up in the like, oh, this is amazing, I can freeze time. But then there's the reality of, okay, but how much is this actually going to cost me? And this article, I appreciate that they don't shy away from the financial side of things.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because it is a big decision.
Yes.
And it is a big financial commitment. And I think often, it's easy to think of it as like an insurance policy.
Right.
It's like, oh, it's just in case.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's a bigger investment.
Yeah. So let's break down those numbers a little bit. Like here in Singapore, when we're talking costs, what are we actually looking at?
Okay, so you've got 3 kind of main components. Okay. First, you've got the egg freezing procedure itself.
Right.
Then you've got storage. You got to pay for storage every year.
Makes sense.
And then finally, you've got IVF if and when you decide to actually use those eggs.
Right. So it's not just like a one-time payment. It's like this ongoing.
It's ongoing. It's like a subscription.
Yeah, it's like a subscription to your future fertility. Okay, so give us some ballpark figures. Like in Singapore dollars, what are we talking for? Like each of those kind of buckets.
So for the procedure itself, you're probably looking at like 7,000 to 9,000 at a public hospital.
Okay.
For one cycle.
Okay.
And then at a private clinic, it can be more like 10 to 15,000.
Okay, so that's already, for some women, that's like, down payment on a flat. Or, a really nice holiday or a car. Like, it's not an insignificant amount.
It's a significant amount of money. And then on top of that, you've got, the annual storage fees, which again vary. But, you could be looking at like $500 at a public hospital, up to $900 at a private clinic per year.
Every
year.
And
then IVF, we've done a whole other deep dive on just IVF costs.
Right.
Which are their own thing. But that's like its own separate
other ballgame. And it's hard to even like give you a number because it depends.
Right. It depends how many cycles you need. It
Right.
depends if there's any like additional procedures that you need.
Yeah.
So that one's really hard to. And I also think it's important to remember, while there are government subsidies in Singapore for IVF treatment, they don't currently apply to elective egg freezing.
Right. So while subsidies can be helpful down the line,
Right.
they don't change that initial like
Correct.
financial commitment.
Exactly. And that's something to bear in mind.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got the financial risks, which are not insignificant. But then you also mentioned earlier non-medical risks, which honestly kind of scare me a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, thinking about like, those giant tanks you see in like sci-fi movies?
Yeah, the ones where they're like,
Liquid nitrogen?
yes, storing all the like embryos and eggs.
Exactly. So these facilities, thankfully, very, very rare, but like there have been cases of storage failures.
Really?
Yeah, power outages, equipment malfunction, even, think natural disasters.
Oh, wow. So even if it's like a 1 in a million chance, the consequences are huge. Huge.
Huge. And so I think that's why, again, transparency is so important. The article talks about, really having open conversations with your clinic. Like, what are your safety protocols? What are your kind of contingency plans?
It's like anything, you're putting a lot of like trust in.
It's a huge amount of trust.
In the clinic that you choose.
Yeah, for sure.
Makes you think. Okay, so let's say hypothetically someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, this is me, this is my path, I'm going to do this. What happens next? What does it actually look like to freeze your eggs?
So you've got to find a qualified clinic here in Singapore.
Okay.
Make an appointment.
It's not just like you just walk in and are like, give me the eggs.
No. Not quite that simple.
Oh, okay. So what can you expect at that first appointment?
So they're going to kind of gather all your information, right? Your medical history, family history, any existing conditions. They want to get the whole picture.
Okay, so it's like a fertility deep dive, your own personal deep dive.
Exactly. So they're going to probably do a transvaginal ultrasound just to kind of check out your ovaries, get a sense of your ovarian reserve.
Okay.
How many eggs we're working with here.
Right.
Any potential issues. And then they'll also do blood work.
Okay, so blood work, not just like general, blood work, but we're talking about those hormones that everyone's always like,
yeah.
Oh, your hormones, your heart.
Exactly. FSH, AMH.
Okay. Can you break those down for us really quick? What are those telling us?
Yes. So FSH, that's your follicle stimulating hormone.
Okay.
Basically, that's the hormone that's produced by your pituitary gland. And it basically tells your ovaries to start developing follicles,
Okay.
which each contain an egg.
Okay.
So higher FSH levels, that can sometimes be a sign that, ovarian reserve is diminishing a little bit.
Okay. Makes sense.
AMH, that's anti-Müllerian hormone. So that was actually produced by the cells that surround the developing eggs. So that gives us a good idea of the remaining egg supply.
Okay. So together, those two kind of paint a picture of what's going on.
Exactly, of where you're at.
Cool. Okay.
Right. And then, depending on the clinic, depending on your situation, they might also be like, hey, let's tweak some lifestyle stuff.
Okay. Like what?
Diet.
Okay.
Supplements. Like, are you on the right supplements to kind of, help egg quality?
Yeah.
Stress. Stress plays a huge role. Like, are you managing your stress? So it really is like a very holistic view.
Okay.
But once you get the green light, then it's hormone injection time.
Okay. So hormone injections. How long does that part typically last?
So usually about, 10 to 12 days of daily injections. The needles are actually very fine, though.
Okay. Good to know.
So it's not as scary as maybe some people think.
Yeah. No, that's always good. But even with a fine needle, daily injections, that's a commitment. Plus, I imagine there's a lot of monitoring throughout that whole phase.
Oh yeah, lots of monitoring. You're going to be going back for a blood test. They're going to be doing ultrasounds just to make sure your body's responding, your hormone levels are where they need to be.
Right.
So, yeah, you're going to get to know your clinic very well.
Yeah. You're basically best friends by that point.
Okay. And then the main event, egg retrieval. What's that like?
Okay, so egg retrieval, relatively quick procedure, usually done under sedation. You're not going to feel a thing.
Okay, good.
So they use a thin needle, guided by ultrasound, and they just aspirate those mature eggs from your ovaries.
Okay, and then once they're out, what happens? Where do they go?
Straight to the lab.
Where they're cooled, they're frozen using a process called vitrification, which is really cool.
Okay.
It's like super fast freezing
Okay.
to help prevent any ice crystal formation, which,
Right, because you don't want, it can damage the cells.
The freezer burn, exactly.
Exactly.
Wow, it's amazing how far, the technology has come.
I know, it's remarkable.
Where it's like, you could just...
It's like hitting pause.
Pause.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so, we've covered a lot. Motivations, costs, the risks, what it actually looks like. It's a lot to kind of wrap your head around.
It is. And this is just a snapshot right now.
Right.
Of what we know.
Exactly.
And things are changing all the time. Think about what it'll be like in 5 years, 10 years. Right. That's the thing. It's like you're making this decision now, but based on kind of the information you have now.
Right.
Which, who knows what the future holds?
Exactly. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds? And I think that's why, I don't know, for me, I think just having these conversations.
Yes.
Just starting to ask the questions, I think that's so powerful.
Absolutely. So everyone listening, we hope that this deep dive has given you a lot to think about, a lot to perhaps discuss, and as always,
dive deep.
Dive deep.